Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your time with us. This is just such an important topic, and we are so honored to have Louisa and Bruce with us tonight. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to 95% Group in case some of you might not be familiar with us. So 95% Group is a leading publisher of resources in professional learning, and these are our foundational principles under which we work. We believe that all children deserve a chance to learn to read, and our purpose is to unlock the power of literacy for every child. And we do that by building on the science to empower teachers, actually all educators, educational leaders, all educators, by supplying knowledge and resources and the support they need to transform developing readers. And we honor you as educators. We provide trusted and proven literacy solutions, and we're made by educators for educators. Our organization is primarily made up of educators. And so I always like to say that we work with both the mind and the heart of teachers. So thank you again for all that you do every day with your students to make a difference, and we are here to support you in that. So I wanted to share with you that we are so delighted at 95% Group to, we're the proud owners of Spellography, and we wanted to share with you how Spellography fits within our ecosystem. So you'll notice here what we've done is we've just kind of created a nice, pre-K through 8 look at some of our flagship products. We have core products, we have assessments, we have intervention that are all connected in what we call our 195 literacy ecosystem. And what you'll see in core instruction is we have our phonics core program, we have our phonemic awareness program, and you'll see that Spellography fits right within our core offerings in those all-important middle grades. Also, if you look at the intervention band, you'll see that Spellography fits within the intervention band as well for some of our students who need that extra support. And this infographic really showcases it as well. What you see is our Tier 1, our flagship program, Phonics Core program, Tier 2, our Phonics Lesson Library, and our Tier 3 95 Wrap. And what you see in this infographic is how each tier has increasing time, intensity, and focus of instruction, all underscored by strong professional learning. And we're proud to have Spellography as part of this important 195 literacy ecosystem. So now I'd like to turn it over to Louisa and Bruce. So I'll take just a moment to introduce them. Dr. Louisa Moats probably needs no introduction, but I'll share with you just a little bit of her esteemed career. She's a leading voice in literacy, and she's a lifelong champion of teachers. She has been a teacher, a psychologist, a researcher, graduate school faculty member, and of course, she's the author of many influential scientific journal articles and books and policy papers on topics of reading, spelling, language, and teacher preparation. You certainly know her as the co-author of Letters and the groundbreaking book, Speech to Print, Language Essentials for Teachers, among many other important works. She served as a board member and officer of the International Dyslexia Association for many years, and she led the committee that developed those IDA knowledge and practice standards for teachers of reading. So again, she's here tonight to talk about Spellography, which she co-authored with our next guest, and that guest is Dr. Bruce Rosow. He is the co-author of Spellography. Bruce began his career as an intermediate grade classroom teacher in Vermont before moving into remedial instruction and also serving as an academic dean. Dr. Rosow taught in the Language and Literacy program through the Reading Institute in Williamstown, Massachusetts, Simmons College, and Bay Path University. He ran the language lab at the Wyndham Central Supervisory Unit in Vermont, which provided remedial instruction to struggling middle and high school readers. And he is currently a private tutor. So I'm going to welcome our guests and turn it over to you, Louisa.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you for that great introduction. It's so nice to have everybody with us tonight. I'm really excited that we get to do this series. Bruce and I, we are extremely pleased with the way Spellography is coming out and with the support we've received from our publisher right here. Thank you very much. So this is the second in a series. If you missed the first one, please have a look at it. We're addressing the aspects of language in this series tonight with a focus on the phoneme grapheme correspondence system that is the bedrock organizational system for our orthography. Next time, we're going to focus on morphology, and the final session will be focused on the relationship between grammar and syntax, word usage, and spelling. So, just as a reminder, and we showed this in the first go-round, in order to be able to spell or read a word, what the brain has to do is link speech sounds with written symbols and connect those correspondences with meaning, and meaning is processed within the context of a sentence and the subject matter that the person is reading or writing about. These relationships among these different areas of the brain are interactive and mutually supportive, so that when we bolster the ability of one of these linguistic systems to process language, we can have an effect on the others. And the trick is in instruction, and this is an idea that underlies everything we do, the trick in instruction is to link sound with print, with meaning and usage. So we can put it that way. I also want to remind everyone, if you missed the first session in this series, we focused on the role of phonology in learning to spell. And I put here a quote from a study I did in 2005 with Rebecca Treeman, Marie Cassar, and others, where we examined the relationship between phonological processes and the ability to spell. And we, like other researchers, found this, that phonology, although important for all aspects of literacy learning, is even more critical in learning to spell than in learning to read, which may surprise some people because we tend to think of spelling as a visual memory activity when in fact it depends very much on phonological processes. So we say that orthographic knowledge is laid over a phonological foundation. If that phonological foundation is weak, orthographic skills cannot develop sufficiently to support good spelling and compensate for the underdeveloped phonological skills. So keep that in mind as we turn our attention this time to the print system itself, to the organization of our orthography and what it represents. In spellography, we refer to the language systems as a layer cake. And each layer of the language is an integral part of the whole, but can be addressed in instruction and can be understood as a system unto itself. So we are tonight going to focus on phoneme grapheme correspondences, what they're all about, and some of the patterns of letter use and rules for endings and syllable types that we teach explicitly in the layer of language that we call the orthographic system. So we illustrate this by taking the word misspelled. We did this in the first session as well, and look at it from the standpoint of the linguistic information that is represented in the print. So the print represents three morphemes: miss, a prefix, spell, a base word, and the suffix ed that marks the past tense. So the word has three morphemes. And if we're a good speller and we know the print system well, when we look at the word or recall the word, we process the word at this level of morphology. We also process the word at the level of syllables. So misspelled is 2 syllables, and you'll notice that the number of morphemes and the number of syllables is not the same, because in the word misspelled, the final suffix is pronounced only as a single speech sound, not as a separate syllable. And how many graphemes are in the word? Well, there are 7, and 3 of these graphemes are more than one letter. So we segment the word into M, I, SS, which represents one speech sound, P, E, LL represents one speech sound, and ED represents one speech sound. So the number of phonemes is represented by the same number of graphemes almost all the time, with very few exceptions or oddities that we don't need to get hung up on, because the base organizational principle of this alphabetic writing system that we use in English is that graphemes represent phonemes at the most basic level of representation. Also, there is information in this written word about morphology that ends up as a letter sequence, or is shown by a letter sequence of two S's, and that happens because the prefix gets attached to the base word, and each of these pieces or morphemes has an S in it, so we end up with two S's. And finally, the two L's can be explained by the fact that the word is of Anglo-Saxon origin, and there's a convention with especially single syllable words of Anglo-Saxon origin that we double the final consonant letter for words ending in the sounds s and ul, and sometimes z as well. So that's a lot. That's a lot of information that is represented in this letter sequence. And it's information, all of it's linguistically explained, and it's information that a good speller processes very rapidly and has stored in their memories as the features of the orthographic system. And once we learn about this system, we then can engage in something called orthographic mapping, which is the process of learning a new word and associating print with speech and language. So let's dig into this idea of phoneme-grapheme correspondences a little bit more. If I map out the correspondences in these two words, over value, what do I see? I see that the grapheme ER represents the R-controlled vowel which is so unified that it is represented as one sound, not a vowel and consonant combination as it looks like in print, but a single sound And also in the word value, we have v, a, l, and then this combination u on the end of the word that's represented with the grapheme UE. We'll be talking more about these correspondences of u and u a little bit later in this talk. But this is a bit of a puzzle. How do we represent, or how do we think about this combination u? And what we've chosen to do, and this is not by any means universally agreed on out there, how we talk about and represent the glided oo sound, u. We have chosen in our system to represent it as a glide y and the vowel oo, and we talk about this as the glided long u sound, u. But when we teach kids, we talk about this glide y as a hidden consonant in the word that is not directly represented in the print with the letter Y, but it is represented by certain letters and letter combinations that can stand for U and also oo, and we'll get into the ins and outs of that in a few minutes. Now, just big picture stuff here. Those of you who have heard me talk before know that I often refer to this study, which is old, but which in my readings has never been contradicted. And that is that when we do a computerized analysis, and this was done in 1966 with government funding, the US government wanted to know whether English was really a regular quote, phonetically based language or not, or whether it was totally irregular. And what they found was that it's kind of halfway regular, because about 50% of the most common 20,000 words in English can be spelled using a computer algorithm, can be spelled correctly if you know what the phoneme grapheme correspondences are and the typical positions in which those correspondences are used. Another 34% of our common vocabulary can be spelled with one error, usually on the vowel. So words we think of as irregular often are mostly regular, except for some oddity or unpredictability in the vowel spelling. And another 10% of our most common words can be spelled correctly if we consider word origin and word meaning in explaining the spelling. So all things considered, about 4% of our written vocabulary in our orthography is truly irregular. So we should not succumb to these claims that English is just capricious and awful and irregular and monstrous. And we should hold out for the idea that it is teachable, although it takes kids longer to learn the English writing system than some others, because it is more complex and there's more to learn. A core concept in understanding phoneme grapheme correspondences is that a grapheme is often more than one letter. So it is not a letter is not synonymous with the idea of a grapheme. Graphemes can be 1, 2, 3, or even 4 letters in English. A grapheme has a functional correspondence with a phoneme. It is that letter or letter group that represents a phoneme. And if we get that down, we can make much more sense of the system and the way it works than if we try to approach this system by saying that each letter has a sound or something like that. That just doesn't get us very far. So key concepts that we're teaching in our program are these with regard to just the phoneme grapheme correspondence system. The first one that we teach over and over again is that graphemes can do different jobs in our spelling system. We have quite a few chameleon graphemes. We call them chameleon graphemes because they kind of change up what they do depending on the word that they're used in. And some obvious examples are the letter C that stands for S or K, the letter N that stands for N or Ng, the letter G that can stand for J or G. And the second major concept that we emphasize in spellography, especially in the first two books, A and B, is that the position of a sound in the word often governs how it is spelled. So, for example, and we'll elaborate this in a minute, the sound J after a short vowel is spelled with DGE. That's a convention, not the letter J. And it's because no word in English can use the letter J on the end. It's just an orthographic convention that scribes have imposed on us. But if J is preceded by a consonant or a long vowel, it will be spelled with just GE, as in the words plunge, huge, and bulge. So the position of a sound in a word, and also the position of a grapheme in relation to others has great explanatory value for why words are spelled the way they are. And this is the essence of what Mark Seidenberg talks about when he talks about statistical learning and learning the print code, because there are so many patterns that have to do with position constraints that many kids learn them with brief instruction or through exposure, they kind of pick them up. But what we found and what research suggests is that while they may pick them up for word recognition and reading, there isn't enough deep processing of what's going on to be informative in spelling. So that's when we begin to see real differences between how kids read and how they spell. and spelling requires more explicit attention to these position constraints than reading does. So let's go back to the sound J and the letters J or G. We explicitly teach, for example, when each of these letters is used for what sound. So a beginning exercise might be this, or this is right out of Spellography. Make words out of these partial words by adding a G or a J. Do you get a real word? So here, the first one, we can have jot or got. We can have gut, but not jut spelled, or maybe we can. And then we have golf, and we have just with a J, gist with a G, jungle with a J, goose with a G, just or gust, that can be a J or a G, depending on what word you're making. Ginger with a G, Jim with a G, judge with a J, and gentle with a G. And what pattern is being used here? Letters that follow soft G, E, I, and Y make that or determine that that letter is going to represent its soft sound. And the letters that follow hard G, A, O, or U, are marking that G as representing its hard sound, G. But the letter J can be used before A, O, or U, and actually before E or I as well. So the next stage of learning about this is that instruction with a regular word sort of words that follow this pattern, but then we also invoke the history of our language and explain that some of the exceptions that kids run into very early, like the words get and gift and give and girl, don't follow this regular pattern. And why? And the reason for that is that the Vikings who invaded Britain in the 800s brought words into the language that have stuck through hundreds of years of the French invasion and the Renaissance and so on. And those conventions just stayed in the spelling system of using a hard G in front of words like gift and girl and get. So there we have it. We can blame those exceptions on history. This, by the way, is our little mascot dog, Yogi, who is a subject in a lot of the illustrations and cartoons that we have throughout the program to amuse kids. So then we look at the pattern for spelling J at the ends of single syllable words, and we do a phoneme grapheme matching exercise and call kids' attention to what is going on when there's a DGE in these words, what kind of vowel comes before the DGE, and what's going on when GE is used at the ends of words, and they see through the sorting and some guidance we give that when GE is used, it is preceded by another consonant. And so this spelling it wouldn't be appropriate to have an extra D in there because there's already a consonant guard that keeps this J from, or it does its job as following the short vowel and keeping the short vowel from having its long sound. And then another stage of word sorting calls kids' attention to that principle, and also the fact that when the vowel is not short, it's long, then GE is the preferred spelling. You cannot have a DGE after a long vowel. That pattern doesn't work. All right, so we, in the beginning of spellography, focus on these basic consonant correspondences, phoneme grapheme correspondences. We introduce basic vowel correspondences. but by really introducing in book A, the closed syllable patterns primarily, we then set ourselves up to focus on the other common syllable patterns, especially from book B onward. And of course, we're referring to 6 basic written syllable types that exist as conventions for representing vowel sounds. That's why we teach them. And they're especially useful when kids are at the stage of spelling and decoding single syllable and shorter words, especially words of Anglo-Saxon origin. These syllable types work better with words of Anglo-Saxon origin than they do with longer Latinate words. And we'll get into that as we get into morphology. So closed syllables. And Bruce, I want you now to explain the brilliant strategy that you have taught kids forever about the nature of the closed syllable.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you, Louisa. There's debate about the usefulness of syllable types in instruction, and it's there's good points to be made on both sides of that debate. But as Louisa says, for Old English words, syllable types explain how to sound out, read, and spell vowels. So the reason to teach syllables is to teach vowel spellings. And the story that goes along with this is that vowels can be annoying because they show off. And the showing off is when you sing, you hold on to the vowel sound. O, say, a, can, a, you, oo, C, E. I won't sing for you. That'll drive everybody away. But vowel sounds are, they show off. They're kind of like cats. They screech. They can be held for as long as a singer wants to hold them, and they show off. And so the consonants are a little annoyed by that. And so the little story that goes along with this is that the vowels, when they're by themselves, get snatched up and thrown in the dungeon and guarded. And so the guards stay on the far side of the vowel. And when a vowel is in the dungeon, it feels sad, as you would. And instead of saying a, it says ah, and so forth. So the sound of the vowel in the dungeon, closed in by the guards keeping the door closed, is short. We have a pattern of more than one guard, and we explain that as we get into silent E and the way in which guards can be distracted. If there's a single guard, that guard can get distracted and the vowel can escape. But if there's more than one guard, then that vowel is stuck in the dungeon. So there's a common pattern, and that common pattern is that short vowels attract consonants. And that pattern helps us explain not only final J with the DGE or consonant GE, but it's the same exact pattern that we see in final K with K versus CK, and with Ch with CH versus TCH. And so one of the things that we tried to do in our scope and sequence of spellography is take similar concepts and bring them together in neighboring lessons so that it's not isolated memorization of a pattern, but it's the generalization of this pattern. So short vowels are weak. They get guarded by more than one consonant often, and that more than one consonant characteristic is illustrated through CK, TCH, DGE, and doubles like the FLS and Z rule.
Cool. I love that. So we didn't make it scary for kids. We have these yogi guards here who are keeping the vowel from singing its long vowel sound. Yeah. Okay. So the principle of guarding short vowels. And by the way, half of all the syllables in English are closed syllables. So that fact also justifies an initial concentration on closed syllables because there's so many more words that have closed syllables, and that pattern is also unique to English. The more purely Latinate languages, Spanish and Italian, have lovely open syllables and much higher frequency. Okay, so this pattern is fairly easy for reading, and that is that a double consonant between two syllables indicates that the first vowel is short and is a closed syllable. So there's a big body of words kids can learn that have a double letter in between the two syllables that are joined. And also, this principle is the principle, the guarding of the short vowel is the principle underlying the consonant doubling rule for suffix addition. And often it's not presented that way. So we link this idea of this ending rule to this general principle of the need of the short vowel to have extra guards. So the way it works, as you know, is in a one-syllable word spelled with one vowel letters followed by one consonant letter. If the suffix begins with a vowel, you have to double the final consonant before adding the suffix. Because if you don't double the final consonant before adding the suffix, the vowel may be able to escape and sing its long vowel sound, and we don't want that to happen because that's not what's in the word. Now, this consonant doubling rule is that, and the other two suffix addition rules, drop silent E and the Y change rule, are the cause of many spelling errors, especially in intermediate kids. They have not internalized this. They need a whole lot of practice. And one of the things we've done is break the learning process into manageable steps so that we don't just throw the rule at them and expect them to get it, but we start with identifying the words to which this rule would apply. So that's the first step. Which words have this 1-1-1 pattern, one syllable, one vowel, one consonant? Because if kids can't think about that, then they're still going to be at sea in applying the doubling rule. They won't know which words need it and which words don't. And then the second step is for them to identify or find the suffixes that start with vowels, because the doubling rule doesn't apply if a suffix begins with a consonant. So we do a sort of these and rehearse that and practice it a number of times. Then we apply this idea in a number of ways. So we not only want kids to be able to apply the doubling rule in a word like wag with the vowel suffix, and same with all these examples, we also want kids to be able to say and identify why and when it does not apply. So in this case, we have a vowel team, so it doesn't apply. In this case, the suffix begins with a consonant, so it doesn't apply. In this case, the word ends with a consonant digraph, so it doesn't apply. But we want kids to think that through and recognize every aspect of a rule like that before we expect them to internalize it. And we practice it all throughout the entire 4-book sequence, actually. And speed read. Bruce, explain the speed reads.
All right, I will explain the speed reads. But I want to add that the rules for suffixes boggle the minds of many students. And it is really critical that the students master these 3 rules, not in isolation, but with each other for advanced word study. As we start getting into Latin and Greek words with derivational endings, with compound suffixes, the need to apply the rules becomes really significant. And if the students haven't mastered these rules in simple Old English words, they trip all over the place in applying the rules to longer, more complex words. Same rules, but the words are more complex. In terms of the speed read, there are a couple of principles. One is we think about minimal pair as a principle for the way to construct the speed read, so that you're always building on a word bit to bit. And you could see we've added a suffix and the doubling, then bitter, and then bitterly we double the suffix, compound suffix. So there's always a change. There's always something that stays the same and something that changes. And the thought behind that is to have the student really attend to the orthography, really attend to what's consistent and what's changed, and be able to see those changes. And oftentimes those changes happen at a parsing place or a chunk, where a longer 2-syllable, 3-syllable word gets broken into parts. So the speed reads work both with lists, and they also work with stories. The lists are more of this minimal pair construction. Sometimes we change morphemes, sometimes we change vowel sounds, and so forth. And then the fun reads are the application in connected text. And in addition to practicing the orthographic pattern, in this case, consonant doubling and the doubling rule, the stories are really important for engagement. And that's a big theme throughout spellography, is when you're working with children, if the kids are laughing, if they're having fun, if there's enough goofiness to the material, that lets kids in. It makes students more engaged. If they're engaged, there's a deeper engagement, there's a deeper regulation, there's a deeper engagement with the task itself. And so there is a lot of humor throughout, and I hope you catch some of the humor in this particular one.
Bruce gets all the credit for the humor. I'm way too serious. This is one of my favorites. I especially like we told him to stop moping and just hitch Albert to a wagon. Jim hee-hawed and sold the car for junk. I like that. Okay. All right. So then book B emphasizes, and book C, the long vowels, because long vowels and vowel teams and vowel R combinations, we'll leave that out for now, but vowel teams, VCE patterns, and open syllables all can represent long vowels. Vowel teams are especially problematic, so we give them the royal treatment. And just to illustrate the difference between teaching reading and teaching spelling, we have these two oo sounds in the English language that are rarely distinguished in reading programs. We just expect kids to be able to read words with oo and u, and have their natural language take over in reading words with these vowels. But when it comes to spelling, it's another thing altogether. Not only do these sounds have some of the same spellings, they have some different ones too. So what do? We attack it head on. So first we ask kids to sort the words by sound, to again call their attention. I love what Bruce said about calling kids' attention to the internal details of both speech and print, because that way we're in the best position to match them up. So the difference between humor and rumor, cute and suit, cubic and rubric, fuse and choose, few and chew, butane and routine. It's very important to start there. And then step by step, first we have kids sorting words that have the oo, the unglided oo in them, to look at what graphemes can be used in what position in the word. So inside a syllable or word that contains a consonant, we have 4 different ways to represent oo. And at the end of an open syllable inside of a word, we just use the letter oo, letter U as in tuna. And in the final position, at the end of a word, we can use UE or EW for oo. So we do a sort there and examine that. But then we contrast that with spellings for you. And we know that kids need to pay attention to what the sound is, because inside a syllable or a word that contains a consonant, we don't have U, I, or O, O, or there was another one in there, OU. We don't have those spellings as options for glided U. We do use a single letter in an open syllable inside a word, single letter U. But at the ends of words, we also use UE and EW for U. So putting that together, we can then look at and contrast words that end in U, words that end in U, and look at the spellings that are allowed. And in each case, we can use UE and EW for both, for each sound. So that's the kind of analysis and practice that we do. And then we have more fun exercises. The story of Stu and Mary Lou. You could give you 1 minute to read this. And I'd love to hear the chuckles echoing across the land. Okay, so we'll leave Stu to brood in the gloom. I know that kids love that kind of thing. When we did Spellography 20 years ago, the first edition of it, we would get letters from kids saying, "Your humor is outrageous," is what they would say. And they loved it because it was fun.
Yeah.
So back to the overall lesson routines, the instructional routines, a typical lesson. In a typical lesson, we explain the spelling concept. We have a brief phoneme awareness activity that is directly related to the concept we're teaching. We study the spelling pattern. We do a variety of exercises with that pattern. We read lists and stories with those pattern-based words to build word recognition with those patterns. We analyze the morphological structure of words, which will be our emphasis next time. We compose or complete sentences and look at usage and word usage in a sentence to help explain the spelling. And at the end of every lesson, we write words and sentences to dictation. Next time when we get together, we're going to focus on word origin and morphology and understanding spelling. We're going to look at peculiar phoneme grapheme correspondences for different historical layers of language, such as the CH for ch in Anglo-Saxon-based words, CH for sh in French-derived words, CH for k in Greek-derived words, PH for f in Greek-derived words, and so on. And we're going to look at the relationship between the historical layer of language and the way words are structured, the way the morphemes work, the way the words are built. And one way to illustrate this and the richness of English is to contrast words we use for concepts in Anglo-Saxon, words for similar concepts that come from Latin, and words in the same semantic sphere that come from Greek. So this is the kind of thing that Bruce and I get very entertained by. We hope that you are entertained as well.
So thank you all so much for joining us. So this is designed to show you all of our different contact information for our regional account execs. If you want to know more about 95% Group and any of the products, of course, including Spellography, you can contact your regional account executive. So we're just going to leave this up here so that you can find that person's name and contact information if you'd like to reach out to your regional account executive. And here's my contact information if you'd like to reach out to me as well. So I'd like to thank once again, Dr. Moats and Dr. Rosow. This was just wonderful. I know that people really appreciated this evening. Nikki, thank you so much. And Barbara, thank you so much for helping to organize this wonderful event. And thank all of you for tuning in tonight. We hope to see you at the next webinar.